The galaxy had grown comfortable with humanity's absence. For 3 centuries, the human colonies had gone silent, their distress signals unanswered, their worlds seemingly abandoned to the cosmic void. The Galactic Federation had written them off as another failed species, too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to survive their own expansion into the stars. Now, as the Zephyrian Republic faced total annihilation from an unstoppable enemy, their desperate plea for aid echoed across the same frequencies once used by those long-silent human worlds. They expected salvation from their fellow Federation members, advanced civilizations with peaceful philosophies and sophisticated technologies. They never expected their salvation to come from the species the galaxy had forgotten, or that humanity had spent those 300 years of silence preparing for war. The emergency broadcast cut through the static of deep space communications like a blade through silk. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Republic clutched the edge of her console as the transmission filled the command center of the orbital station above Zephyr Prime. "This is Admiral Kextera of the Third Fleet." The voice crackled with desperation that no Zephyrian military officer had ever displayed before. "All Federation vessels, all civilian craft, anyone who can hear this transmission, we need immediate assistance. The Devourers have broken through our outer defensive ring. Repeat, the Devourers have broken through our outer defensive ring. Estimated time until planetary bombardment begins is 18 hours. We have over 4 billion civilians who cannot be evacuated in time." Veltar's 4 arms moved across her communication array with practiced efficiency, her scaled skin shifting from its natural blue to the pale gray of extreme stress. Around her, junior diplomats and military liaisons worked frantically to establish contact with Federation forces throughout the sector. The responses that came back were uniformly disappointing. Veltar, the Centauri Defense Fleet, reports they're engaged with Devourer advanced scouts near the Rigel system. Reported communications, Officer Zixmora. They cannot divert any ships without compromising the core worlds. The Altering Medical Corps is willing to send refugee ships, but they're at least 40 hours out, added another aide. What about the Andromedans? Their battlecruiser group was supposed to be patrolling this sector, Veltar asked, though she already knew the answer from the aide's expression. No response from the Andromedans. Intelligence suggests they've pulled back to defend their home cluster. Veltar closed her primary eyes while keeping her secondary pair focused on a tactical display. The Devourer fleet showed as angry red dots moving inexorably towards Zephyr Prime. These weren't the civilized enemies the Federation was used to dealing with, species that could be reasoned with, negotiated with, or at worst fought in limited engagements with clear objectives. The Devourers were something else entirely. They had emerged from the galactic rim 18 months ago, a fleet of ships that seemed to be grown rather than built, with hulls that writhed and pulsed with an organic malevolence. Their technology was beyond anything the Federation had encountered, and their intentions were terrifyingly simple. They consumed everything in their path. Planets, space stations, entire star systems, all transformed into raw materials for their ever-growing fleet. The Zephyrian Republic had been the first major Federation member to face their full attention. The outer colonies had fallen within weeks, their populations simply vanishing as the Devourer ships stripped away atmosphere, oceans, and even the planetary crust themselves. The survivors who had escaped told stories that seemed too horrific to believe, of massive biomechanical constructs that harvested not just resources but the neural patterns of sentient beings, adding their knowledge to some vast, unknowable intelligence. "Ambassador, we're receiving a response to the general distress call," Zixmora announced, her voice carrying a note of hope. "Unknown vessel identification, but they're broadcasting Federation emergency codes." "Put them through," Veltar ordered, feeling the first stirring of relief she had experienced in hours. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything in the Federation database. It was rough, speaking Galactic Standard with an accent that seemed to twist the carefully modulated syllables into something more raw, more immediate. "Zephyrian Command, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the human vessel Indomitable. We received your distress call and are responding. Please transmit your current tactical situation and defensive positions." Veltar exchanged glances with her staff. "Human vessel? Run an identification check on species database. The result came back almost immediately, and Veltar felt her skin pale another shade. Humans, they're listed as a failed expansion species. Last contact was approximately 300 years ago. Status: presumed extinct. The human voice cut through their discussion. Zephyr in command, we're reading massive energy signatures approaching your system. We need those tactical positions now if we're going to be of any help. Veltar made a decision that would later be recorded as one of the most significant moments in galactic history. Human vessel Indomitable. This is Ambassador Veltar. We welcome any assistance. Transmitting our current positions and Devourer fleet composition now. The response came back immediately, and something in a human's tone made Veltar's spine crest flatten with unease. Received, Ambassador. Interesting. We haven't seen bioships of this configuration before, but the energy signatures are familiar enough. We're 18 hours out at maximum burn. Hold your positions and keep your people clear of the engagement zone. Captain Shun, if I may ask, what ship class is the Indomitable? Our databases don't have specifications for human vessels. There was a pause that seemed to stretch far longer than the light speed delay would account for. When the human spoke again, there was something that might have been amusement in her voice. The Indomitable is what we call a dreadnought, Ambassador. She's got some friend with her. You might want to update your databases. We've been busy these past few centuries. The transmission cut out, leaving the Zephyrian command center in stunned silence. Veltar stared at the tactical display, where a new group of contacts had appeared at the edge of sensor range. The computer was having difficulty resolving their signatures. The ships seemed to be running with minimal emissions, appearing more like dark voids in space than active vessels. How many ships? She asked quietly. Difficult to determine, the sensor operator replied. At least 12, possibly more. They're using some kind of stealth technology we're not familiar with. But Ambassador, the operator's voice trailed off. What is it? The mass readings, if these are accurate, some of these ships are larger than our orbital defense platforms. The biggest one is reading at nearly 8 kilometers in length. Veltar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature controls. The largest ship in the Zephyrian fleet was barely half that size, and it was considered a technological marvel. What had these supposedly extinct humans been building in their 3 centuries of silence? The hours passed with agonizing slowness. The Devourer fleet continued its approach, and long-range sensors began to pick up the characteristic distortions that preceded their organic ship's feeding process. Several outer system asteroid belts simply vanished, their matter converted into fuel and raw materials for the approaching armada. Admiral Kextaraj's transmissions grew increasingly desperate as the remaining Zephyrian fleet attempted to buy time for civilian evacuations. The Admiral had positioned his ships in a defensive formation around the 4th planet, hoping to force the Devourers into a costly engagement that might delay their assault on the homeworld. Veltar, the Admiral, is requesting immediate fallback to the inner system, Zixmore reported. The Devourer advance elements are beginning their attack run. Veltar watched the tactical display with growing horror. The red dots representing enemy ships seemed to flow around the Zephyrian defensive positions like water around rocks. Their impossible maneuvers defying every principle of physics she understood. Bright flashes marked the destruction of Zephyrian vessels, each one representing hundreds of crew members and decades of construction time. Tell the Admiral to maintain position as long as possible, she ordered, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. The human ships should be arriving soon. As if summoned by her words, the sensor displays erupted with new contacts. The human fleet had dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, and now Veltar could see why the computer had struggled to identify them. These weren't ships in any sense she understood the term. They were mobile fortresses, bristling with weapon systems that seemed to have been designed by someone who viewed subtlety as a character flaw. The largest vessel, presumably the Indomitable, was indeed massive beyond comprehension. Its hull was angular and aggressive, painted in dark gray with harsh white markings that looked like they had been applied with a stencil. Weapon turrets dotted its surface like a metallic disease, and sensor spines jutted from the superstructure at irregular angles. Zephyrian Command, this is Captain Shun. We're moving to engage. You might want to keep your ships clear. We haven't field-tested some of these systems yet. Captain, what are your engagement parameters? Veltar asked, trying to process the sight of the human fleet as it accelerated toward the battle. Parameters? The human's voice carried that same note of amusement. Ambassador, we're going to kill every last one of these things, burn their hulks to scrap metal, and then hunt down anything else like them in this galaxy. Does that clarify our intentions? Veltar's translator implants struggled with several of the human terms, particularly the casual way the captain spoke of destruction on such a scale. Before she could respond, the human fleet opened fire. The weapons that lanced out from the human ships were unlike anything in the Federation arsenal. Instead of the elegant energy beams favored by most civilizations, the humans seemed to prefer weapons that looked like they were designed to physically assault the universe itself. Brilliant white-hot projectiles streaked across space at significant fractions of light speed, while exotic energy discharges painted space in colors that hurt to look at directly. The Devourer's ships, which had been systematically dismantling the Zephyrian fleet with contemptuous ease, suddenly found themselves under attack by weapons that didn't behave according to any known physics. Their organic hulls, which had previously adapted to Federation energy weapons within minutes, began to rupture and boil as they were struck by projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. By the 7 moons, whispered one of Veltar's aides. They're not just attacking the ships, they're attacking the space around them. It was true. The human weapons seemed to be designed not just to destroy targets, but to make the very act of existing in their vicinity a hostile experience. Space itself twisted and burned around their projectiles, creating zones where the Devourer's ships simply couldn't function. The largest Devourer vessel, a writhing monstrosity that had been in the process of consuming a disabled Zephyrian cruiser, turned its attention to the approaching human fleet. Biomechanical weapons erupted from its surface, launching projectiles that moved and adapted like living things. The attack would have overwhelmed any Federation vessel within seconds. The Indomitable absorbed the entire barrage without apparent effort. Its hull blazed with energy as shields that looked more like controlled explosions deflected the organic weapons, and then it returned fire with what could only be described as controlled fury. A weapon that seemed to fire compressed stars punched through the Devourer's ship's hull, followed by projectiles that detonated inside the vessel with enough force to briefly create new gravity wells. The Devourer ship died screaming, literally screaming, its death cry broadcasting across every frequency as its organic components realized they were being systematically murdered by weapons designed specifically for that purpose. Captain Chun, Veltar managed to say as she watched the impossible battle unfold. Your weapons, how is this possible? 300 years is a long time, Ambassador, came the reply. We've had time to think about things. Time to prepare. Time to get really, really angry about what happened to our colonies on the Rim. As the human spoke, Veltar noticed something that made her blood freeze. The Devourer fleet wasn't retreating, it was trying to retreat. The bioships that had seemed unstoppable were breaking off their attack runs and attempting to flee the system. But the human ships were faster, more maneuverable, and seemed to know exactly where their enemies would try to run. Did you say your Rim colonies? She asked. Captain, do you mean the Devourers attacked human space before coming here? The pause that followed was filled only by the sounds of destruction as the human fleet systematically hunted down the fleeing Devourer ships. Oh yes, Ambassador, Captain Shin finally replied, and her voice carried a coldness that made the vacuum of space seem warm. They hit our outer worlds 3 years ago. Took them apart piece by piece, just like they've been doing to your people. The only difference is, when they attacked humanity, they made a crucial mistake. What mistake? They left survivors. The aftermath of the battle left the Zephyrian system in an eerie quiet that none of its inhabitants had experienced in months. Where once the Devourer fleet had darkened space with their organic hulls, now only debris fields remained, and even those were being systematically vaporized by human cleanup crews who seemed determined to ensure that not even a single molecule of the enemy remained intact. Ambassador Veltar stood in the observation deck of the orbital station, watching human ships move through the debris field with a methodical precision that was somehow more unsettling than their devastating combat performance. Each piece of Devourer wreckage was being analyzed, cataloged, and then destroyed with weapons that seemed designed specifically for the task. Ambassador Zixmora approached hesitantly. Captain Chun is requesting permission to dock. She wishes to meet with you in person. Veltar turned from the viewport, her secondary eyes still tracking the movement of the human fleet. Just the captain? She's bringing a small delegation. They've requested a full briefing on Devourer activities throughout this sector. And what have we learned about our saviors? Veltar asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Zixmora consulted her tablet, her expression troubled. The computer analysis of the battle footage is concerning. The human weapons appear to violate several fundamental principles of physics as we understand them. Their ship hulls are composed of materials that don't appear in any known periodic table, and their tactical formations suggest a level of coordination that should be impossible without a hive mind. But they're not a hive mind. No, Ambassador. The communication intercepts we've managed to decode suggest they're very much individuals. They just fight like they've been training together for centuries. Veltar considered this as she made her way toward the docking bay. The corridors of the station were filled with Zephyrian civilians and military personnel, all trying to process what they had witnessed. The general mood was one of profound relief mixed with deep unease. They had been saved, but by something they didn't understand and weren't sure they could trust. The docking bay was filled with nervous energy as station security established a perimeter around the human shuttle. The craft itself was another study in aggressive design philosophy. Angular, heavily armored, and bristling with sensor arrays and weapon systems that seemed excessive for a diplomatic transport. When the shuttle's boarding ramp lowered, Veltar got her first look at humanity in over 3 centuries. Captain Sarah Chun was tall by human standards, which made her tower over most of the Zephyrians present. Her uniform was a practical dark blue with minimal ornamentation, though Veltar noticed that what few insignia she wore seemed to be made from some kind of metal that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Her hair was pulled back in a severe style that emphasized the sharp angles of her face, and her eyes held the kind of steady confidence that came from absolute certainty in one's abilities. But what struck Veltar most was the way the human moved. Every gesture was controlled, purposeful, and somehow gave the impression that violence could erupt from her at any moment with devastating efficiency. Ambassador Veltar, Captain Chun extended a hand in the human greeting gesture. Thank you for allowing us to dock. I apologize for the circumstances of our introduction. Veltar carefully matched the gesture, noting that the human's grip was firm but not threatening. Captain Chun, I cannot adequately express our gratitude for your intervention. The Devourer fleet would have destroyed our world within hours. They would have tried, Chun replied with casual certainty. May we proceed to a secure briefing room? My people have some questions about these bio ships, and I suspect you have questions about us. As they moved through the station, Veltar noted that the other humans in Chen's delegation moved with the same predatory grace as their captain. They were constantly scanning their surroundings, not with paranoia, but with the automatic awareness of trained soldiers. More unsettling was the way they seemed to communicate without speaking, subtle glances, and micro-gestures that suggested a level of coordination that bordered on telepathic. The briefing room had been hastily configured for multiple species, with adjustable seating and atmospheric controls. As soon as the humans were seated, Captain Chen activated a device that made Veltar's skin tingle with unfamiliar energy. Privacy screen, Chen explained. Your station's communication systems aren't secure against the kind of surveillance we're worried about. What surveillance? Veltar asked, settling into her own chair. Instead of answering directly, Chun gestured to one of her officers, a woman with cybernetic implants that seemed to be integrated directly into her nervous system. The officer activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room with a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Ambassador, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels of human government, Chun began. But given what you've faced here, you need to understand what we're really dealing with. The holographic display zoomed in on a section of the galactic rim that Veltar recognized as former human space, where the star charts showed dozens of inhabited systems, The display now showed only empty void marked with ominous red symbols. 3 years ago, the Devourers hit our outer colonies, Chun continued. 17 worlds with a combined population of over 800 million people. The attacks followed the same pattern you've experienced. Ships that seemed to grow rather than be built, weapons that adapted to our defenses, and a feeding process that consumed everything down to the planetary core. Veltar studied the display with growing horror. 800 million people, what happened to them? At first, we thought they were all dead. The cybernetic officer spoke for the first time, her voice carrying electronic undertones that suggested extensive neural modification. But survivors from the last colonies to fall reported something worse than simple extermination. The Devourers were harvesting minds, not just bodies. They were adding human neural patterns to their collective intelligence. The display shifted to show detailed scans of Devourer ship construction. Veltar recoiled as she realized what she was looking at. Biological components that contain neural structures clearly derived from sentient beings. The bioships we destroyed today, Chun said quietly, contain the neural patterns of approximately 40,000 individuals from 17 different species. They were still conscious, still aware, but enslaved to the Devourer collective. Every ship we've encountered has been the same. A mobile torture chamber powered by the suffering of absorbed minds. Veltar felt sick. But you said there were survivors from your colonies? 73 people, Chun replied. Out of 800 million. They survived because they were off-world when the attacks began, or because they managed to escape in the first few minutes before the neural harvesting started. They brought us intelligence about Devourer technology, tactics, and, most importantly, their limitations. What limitations? Chun smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. The Devourers aren't actually a single species. They're a collective intelligence that conquers other species and adds their capabilities to its own knowledge base. They've been doing this for millions of years, spreading across the galaxy like a cancer. But every species they've encountered has been peaceful, civilized, dedicated to the kinds of enlightened philosophies that the Federation values. And humans aren't? Ambassador, when the Federation made contact with humanity 300 years ago, we were in the middle of what our historians call the Consolidation Wars. We just finished unifying our home planet through a series of conflicts that lasted nearly 2 centuries. We were violent, aggressive, and completely unprepared for contact with peaceful galactic civilization. Veltar remembered the Federation's first contact reports. Humanity had been classified as a dangerous species and effectively quarantined to prevent them from destabilizing galactic peace. The official policy had been to wait for them to either destroy themselves or evolve beyond their aggressive tendencies. The Federation assumed we would either burn ourselves out or learn to be civilized like everyone else, Chun continued. Instead, we went quiet, stopped responding to diplomatic overtures, pulled back to our core systems, and disappeared from galactic politics entirely. The Federation wrote us off as another failed species. But you didn't fail. No, Ambassador. We learned. We studied every scrap of intelligence about galactic civilization, analyzed every species the Federation had encountered, and came to a very disturbing conclusion. The galaxy was defenseless. Every member species had evolved beyond warfare, beyond the kind of institutional violence necessary to fight an existential threat. You'd all become so civilized that you'd forgotten how to be savage. The holographic display shifted again, showing human space not as it had been 300 years ago, but as it was now, where the Federation databases showed a few dozen primitive colonies. The reality was a network of thousands of worlds connected by infrastructure that put most Federation technology to shame. We spent 3 centuries preparing for war, Chun said simply. Not war against the Federation, war against something like the Devourers. We studied every conflict in galactic history, analyzed every possible threat scenario, and built our entire civilization around the assumption that someday something would come that wanted to destroy all intelligent life. And when the Devourers finally arrived, they found a species that had spent 300 years figuring out better ways to kill things, the cybernetic officer replied. They absorbed 17 of our worlds, added our neural patterns to their collective, and thought they understood us. But the minds they harvested were from frontier colonies, farmers, miners, researchers, people who knew how to survive but not necessarily how to fight. Chun gestured to the display, which now showed the movement of human fleets throughout the galaxy. What the Devourers didn't realize is that the human military has been operating under a very specific doctrine for the past century. Never let the enemy see your real capabilities until you're ready to wipe them out completely. The colonies they attacked were defended by local militia and outdated equipment. They never faced a real human battle fleet. Until now, Chun confirmed. The force that saved your world represents about 2% of human military capability. We've been tracking the Devourer expansion for 2 years, mapping their technology, learning their weaknesses, and waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. Veltar stared at the tactical display, trying to process the implications. How many ships does humanity have? Enough, was all Chun would say. But, more importantly, we have something the Devourers haven't encountered before. 3 centuries of institutional paranoia channeled into weapons development. Every human weapon system has been designed not just to kill, but to kill things that adapt to conventional attacks. That explains the exotic effects we observed during the battle. Quantum disruptors, reality anchors, neural scramblers. We've developed weapons specifically designed to fight enemies that don't follow conventional physics, the cybernetic officer explained. The Devourer's greatest strength is their ability to adapt to new threats. Our weapons are designed to make adaptation impossible. Chun stood and began pacing, her expression growing darker. But there's something else you need to understand, Ambassador. The Devourer fleet you faced here was just a scouting force. Intelligence suggests the main Devourer collective, the core of their civilization, is still out there in the Galactic Rim, and it's massive. We're talking about potentially millions of ships and billions of absorbed minds. What are your intentions regarding this threat? Chun stopped pacing and looked directly at Veltar. Our intentions are very simple, Ambassador. We're going to find the Devourer core, we're going to kill every single one of them, and we're going to free every mind they've enslaved over the past 1,000,000 years. It's going to be the largest military operation in galactic history, and it's going to require resources that even humanity doesn't possess alone. You're asking for Federation assistance? I'm offering Federation survival, Chun corrected. The Devourers aren't going to stop with the Rim worlds. They're methodically working their way toward the galactic core, consuming everything in their path. Based on their current expansion rate, they'll reach the primary Federation worlds within 50 years. You can either help us stop them now, while we have the advantage of surprise, or you can wait for them to absorb a few more civilizations and become even stronger. Veltar considered the humans' words carefully. The Federation had spent millennia building a civilization based on peace, cooperation, and the gradual evolution of species toward enlightenment. The idea of a military campaign on the scale Chun was describing went against everything the Federation represented. But the images of the neural patterns trapped within Devourer ships haunted her thoughts. Billions of conscious beings, enslaved and tortured for the expansion of an alien collective that saw sentient life as nothing more than raw materials. What would you need from the Federation? She asked finally. Industrial capacity, primarily, Chun replied. Shipyards, raw materials, manufacturing capability. We have the weapons technology and tactical expertise, but the scale of this operation will require every spacefaring civilization working together. And if the Federation refuses? Chun's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew colder. Then, humanity will handle the problem alone. It will take longer, and more innocent people will suffer while we build up our forces, but we'll finish it eventually. The difference is, if the Federation helps us now, they'll still exist when it's over. If they don't, she didn't need to finish the thought. The implication was clear. Humanity had spent 3 centuries learning how to wage war on a galactic scale. They wouldn't let political considerations stop them from eliminating an existential threat, even if it meant going through the Federation to do it. I'll need to consult with the Federation Council, Veltar said slowly. Of course, Chun agreed. But, Ambassador, I need you to understand something. The Devourers have been expanding for 1,000,000 years, absorbing the knowledge and capabilities of thousands of species. They've conquered civilizations that make the Federation look primitive. The only reason they haven't overrun the galaxy already is that they've never encountered a species like humanity, a species that considers warfare to be a form of art, and has been practicing that art for 3 centuries without interruption. She gestured to the tactical display, which still showed human ships methodically hunting down every piece of Devourer debris. We're offering the galaxy one chance to stand together against this threat. If that chance is refused, then, when the Devourers finally reach the core worlds, they'll find humanity waiting for them, and this war will be fought over the corpses of every civilization that chose peace over survival. The holographic display faded, leaving the briefing room in relative darkness. Through the viewport, Veltar could see the lights of human ships continuing their systematic cleansing of the system, ensuring that nothing remained of the enemy that had threatened her world. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "The Federation Council has 72 hours, Chen replied. "After that, humanity begins military operations with or without galactic support. We've been patient for 3 centuries, Ambassador. Our patience has limits." The Federation Council chamber on Central Prime had been designed to inspire peaceful contemplation and reasoned debate. Its crystalline walls filtered sunlight into soothing spectrums, while the circular seating arrangement ensured that no species could claim a position of dominance over another. For 8 centuries, it had hosted discussions that resolved conflicts through diplomacy and compromise. Today, it felt more like a tomb. Ambassador Veltar stood at the central podium, her scaled skin reflecting the chamber's soft lighting as she prepared to deliver what she knew would be the most important speech in galactic history. Around her, representatives from 47 member species sat in stunned silence, having just reviewed the intelligence data she had presented about the Devourer threat and humanity's proposed response. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "We face a decision that will determine not just the future of the Federation, but the survival of all conscious life in this galaxy. The evidence before us is clear. The Devourers represent an existential threat that cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or deterred through conventional means." Counselor THYSS of the Regelian Collective raised a tentacle in objection. "Ambassador Veltar, while we appreciate the gravity of your situation, we must question the reliability of these human claims. A species that has been isolated for 3 centuries suddenly appears with weapons technology that seems to violate known physics? This seems more like an elaborate deception designed to militarize the Federation." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Veltar had expected this reaction. The Federation had been built on the principle that all conflicts could be resolved through enlightened discourse, and the idea that some enemies could only be stopped through overwhelming violence was antithetical to everything they represented. "Counselor THYSS, I understand your skepticism," Veltar replied. "But I witnessed the human fleet in action. Their weapons didn't just destroy the Devourer ships. They prevented those ships from adapting to the attacks. This isn't deception. This is capability developed specifically to counter an enemy that grows stronger from every conventional attack." Representative Mordax of the Centauri Union leaned forward, his cybernetic implants gleaming. "Even accepting the human claims at face value, are we prepared to abandon 8 centuries of peaceful evolution to embrace the very violence we've spent millennia overcoming? The cure may be worse than the disease." Veltar activated the holographic display that had been installed for her presentation. The chamber filled with images of Devourer bio ships, their hulls writhing with the neural patterns of absorbed civilizations. "Representatives, this is not theoretical violence. This is an enemy that has already consumed 17 human worlds and absorbed 800 million minds into permanent slavery. The Krillian star system, which fell to the Devourers 6 months ago, contained 4 billion sentient beings. They're all still conscious, still aware, but now serve as biological components in the Devourer fleet." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The hologram shifted to show neural pattern analyses recovered from destroyed Devourer vessels, clearly displaying the brain structures of dozens of known species locked in perpetual service to the collective consciousness. "The question before us," Veltar continued, "is not whether we approve of humanity's methods. The question is whether we choose to act while we still have the ability to choose, or wait until the Devourers make the choice for us." Elder Vrex of the Altarian hegemony stood slowly, his ancient frame requiring the assistance of his mobility platform. As one of the Federation's founding members, his words carried significant weight in council deliberations. "Young ambassador," he said, his voice carrying the authority of centuries, "you speak of choice, but what choice are we truly being offered? The humans present us with an ultimatum. Join their war or face conquest alone. Is this not itself a form of coercion?" Before Veltar could respond, the chamber's emergency communication system activated. A priority transmission was being received from the Galactic Rim, and the originating signature made every delegate freeze in recognition. The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Kexthera, but not as Veltar remembered him. The proud Zephyrian military commander appeared to be speaking from a damaged ship's bridge, emergency lighting casting harsh shadows across his features. Behind him, human technicians worked alongside Zephyrian engineers to repair critical systems. Federation Council. This is Admiral Kexthera reporting from the battleship Righteous Fury. I am transmitting from the Kepler system, where we have just witnessed the destruction of the Devourer Advance fleet that was moving toward the core worlds. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Kepler system was only 40 light-years from Central Prime, far closer to the galactic core than anyone had expected the Devourers to penetrate. The enemy force consisted of approximately 400 vessels of various configurations, the Admiral continued. They had already begun the consumption process on 3 inhabited worlds when a human fleet arrived. What I am about to report may seem unbelievable, but I have sensor logs to verify every detail. The transmission shifted to tactical footage of the battle. The human fleet that engaged the Devourer force was smaller than the one that had saved Zephyr Prime, but their tactics were breathtakingly effective. Instead of the direct assault that had characterized the previous engagement, the humans used a combination of stealth technology and exotic weapons to systematically dismantle the enemy formation. The humans didn't just destroy the Devourer's ships, Admiral Kexthera explained as the footage continued. They reversed the neural absorption process. Every mind that had been enslaved by the collective was freed and transferred to medical ships for treatment and eventual return to their homeworlds. The chamber erupted in chaos. The ability to reverse the Devourer neural absorption process had been considered impossible by every Federation scientist who had studied the phenomenon. If the humans had developed such technology, it changed the entire strategic picture. Counselor TYSS's voice cut through the noise. "Admiral, are you claiming that the humans can undo centuries of Devourer conquest?" "Not centuries, Counselor, but recent absorptions, yes. Their neural restoration technology can free minds that have been enslaved for up to 10 years. Beyond that, the integration becomes too complete to safely reverse. But think about what this means. Every world the Devourers have conquered in the past decade, every population they've enslaved, can be restored." Veltar saw the shift in the chamber's mood immediately. The possibility of rescue, rather than simple revenge, changed the moral calculus of the situation entirely. This wasn't just about stopping the Devourers. It was about undoing their crimes against countless civilizations. The transmission continued with Admiral Kexthera providing tactical details of the engagement, but Veltar noticed that the delegates were no longer focusing on the military aspects. They were studying the footage of human medical ships receiving transferred consciousness patterns of massive neural restoration systems working to rebuild individual minds from the collective matrix. The human commander, Admiral Kexthera, concluded, informed me that this technology exists because humanity spent 2 centuries developing countermeasures to every possible form of mental domination or control. They call it their Freedom Protocol, the absolute refusal to allow any external force to compromise human consciousness, even if it requires the complete reconstruction of damaged minds. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in contemplative silence. Elder Vrex was the first to speak. If the humans possess technology to restore absorbed minds, then our moral obligation becomes clear. We cannot allow political considerations to prevent the rescue of billions of enslaved beings. But Representative Mordax raised another concern. The human ultimatum still stands, Honored Elder. They've given us 72 hours to decide, after which they begin operations regardless of our choice. This neural restoration capability could simply be another form of leverage. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's communications system activated again. This time, the caller identification showed Captain Sarah Chun of the human vessel Indomitable. Federation Council. Her voice carried the same controlled confidence that Veltar remembered. I apologize for interrupting your deliberations, but new intelligence requires an immediate update to our previous briefing. Veltar gestured for the transmission to be put through to the main display. Captain Chun appeared in the center of the chamber, her image sharp and clear despite being transmitted across dozens of light years. Representatives, our deep space reconnaissance has identified the location of the primary Devourer Collective. It's a mobile construct approximately the size of a small moon, containing the absorbed consciousness patterns of every species they've conquered over the past million years. We estimate it holds between 50 and 100 billion enslaved minds. The scale of the number sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. 100 billion conscious beings, trapped in eternal slavery to an alien intelligence that viewed their suffering as a resource to be exploited. The construct is heavily defended by approximately 12,000 bioships of various classes, Chun continued. More importantly, our analysis suggests it's preparing for a massive expansion wave that will allow it to consume entire star systems simultaneously rather than conquering them one world at a time. Counselor THYSS leaned forward. Captain, what is your estimated time frame for this expansion? 18 months, possibly less. When it begins, the Devourers will be able to absorb multiple core worlds simultaneously, adding their technological and intellectual capabilities to the collective. If we allow them to assimilate the Federation's advanced civilizations, they'll become unstoppable. Elder Vrex spoke carefully. Captain Chun, your species clearly possesses capabilities far beyond what any of us realized. If humanity is so powerful, why do you need Federation assistance? Chin's expression grew somber. Because, honored Elder, defeating the primary collective will require a sacrifice that we hope to avoid making alone. Our projections suggest that a direct assault will result in the permanent loss of approximately 30 billion enslaved minds. Beings who will die during the neural disconnection process when the collective is destroyed. However, if we have access to Federation medical technology and neural specialists from multiple species, we can reduce that loss to perhaps 5 million. The moral weight of the decision pressed down on the chamber like a physical force. The choice was no longer simply between war and peace. It was between accepting the death of 5 million beings to save 100 billion, or allowing all 100 billion to remain enslaved forever. There's something else, Chun continued. Our intelligence suggests that the Devourer's expansion over the past million years wasn't random. They've been systematically targeting species with specific technological or biological capabilities, building towards some ultimate goal that our analysts haven't been able to determine. But we believe that goal is nearing completion. Representative Mordax's cybernetic implants flickered as he processed data. Captain, are you suggesting that the Devourer's ultimate objective isn't simply expansion? Correct. They've been harvesting specific types of consciousness and technology for a purpose we don't fully understand. But our xenobiologists believe it involves the creation of something beyond a simple collective intelligence, possibly an attempt to transcend physical existence entirely. The implications were terrifying. An enemy that had spent 1 million years preparing for some form of transcendence, powered by the enslaved minds of countless civilizations, represented a threat that went beyond simple conquest. If they succeeded in their ultimate goal, they might become something that no physical force could stop. Veltar saw the moment when the chamber's mood shifted decisively. The theoretical debates about the morality of warfare became irrelevant when faced with an enemy whose goals threatened the very nature of consciousness itself. Captain Chun, Elder Vrex, said formally, the Federation Council requires time to deliberate, but I believe I can speak for many of us when I say that your proposal has merit. However, we need guarantees about the conduct of this campaign and the role of Federation forces. The Federation will retain full command authority over its own vessels. Chun replied immediately. Human forces will operate independently, but in coordination with Federation strategic objectives. Our only requirement is that Federation commanders accept human tactical doctrine when engaging Devourer forces. Conventional weapons and strategies will only make the enemy stronger. And after the collective is destroyed, humanity will return to our space and resume our previous isolation, if that's what the Federation prefers. We have no territorial ambitions beyond our current borders. Our only objective is the complete elimination of the Devourer threat and the liberation of enslaved minds. Counselor THYSS raised a final concern. Captain, you've demonstrated capabilities that suggest humanity has become something far different from the species we encountered 3 centuries ago. How can we be certain that humans won't become a threat once the Devourers are eliminated? Chun smiled, and for the first time, it seemed genuinely warm rather than predatory. Counselor, 3 centuries ago, humanity was aggressive because we were afraid and ignorant. We've spent those centuries learning that true strength comes not from the ability to conquer others, but from the ability to protect what matters. We've become very good at war because we never want to fight one again. She paused, her expression growing serious. But I won't lie to you about our capabilities. When this is over, humanity will possess the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. The difference is, we'll also have proven that it's possible for a military power to act in service of justice rather than conquest. The choice of how to interpret that demonstration will be up to the Federation. The transmission ended, leaving the delegates to consider what was perhaps the most important decision in galactic history. Veltar looked around the chamber, seeing the internal struggles playing out across dozens of different faces and physiologies. They had 72 hours to choose between their principles and their survival. The vote, when it came, would determine not just the fate of the Federation, but the future of consciousness itself in their galaxy. The combined fleet that assembled at the rally point in the Nexus system represented the largest military force in recorded galactic history. Over 15,000 ships from 47 different species hung in formation around the massive human command vessel Retribution, their varied hull designs creating a constellation of purpose that stretched across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Ambassador Veltar stood on the observation deck of the Federation flagship Unity, watching human engineers work alongside Federation technicians to install neural restoration equipment on every vessel in the fleet. The sight was both inspiring and unsettling. Species that had never designed a military vessel were now learning to integrate weapons systems that could unmake reality itself. It's hard to believe it's only been 6 months, Admiral Kextera observed as he joined her at the viewport. The Zephyrian officer had been placed in command of Federation fleet operations, a decision that surprised no one given his experience working with human tactics. 6 months since the council vote, Veltar agreed. But it feels like we've been preparing for this battle for centuries. The Federation Council's decision had been unanimous, though it had taken the full 72 hours to reach that consensus. The moral weight of 100 billion enslaved minds had ultimately overridden every philosophical objection to military action. But the real work had begun after the vote, as the Federation scrambled to transform its peaceful civilization into something capable of supporting a galactic war. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Retribution, announced the communications officer. Captain Shun is requesting final status updates from all fleet commanders. Kexera activated the holographic display, and Captain Shin's image appeared before them. Over the months of preparation, Veltar had watched the human commander coordinate the most complex military operation in galactic history with a competence that bordered on the supernatural. Every detail, from logistics to strategy to the psychological preparation of Federation crews, had been planned with meticulous care. Admiral, Ambassador, Chen nodded to each of them. We've received confirmation from our reconnaissance drones. The Devourer Collective has begun its expansion protocol. Analysis suggests we have approximately 48 hours before the process becomes irreversible. The holographic display shifted to show the target of their mission, a construct the size of a small moon, its surface writhing with organic structures that pulsed with the neural activity of billions of imprisoned minds. Around it, thousands of bioships maintained defensive formations while massive tendrils of energy reached out toward nearby star systems, beginning the process of large-scale absorption. Our approach vector takes us through 3 layers of defensive screens, Chun continued. The outer perimeter consists of approximately 4,000 ships designed specifically for long-range interdiction. The middle layer has 2,000 heavy assault vessels with adaptive weaponry. The inner defense network includes 6,000 ships of various classes, all connected to the collective's primary consciousness. Admiral Kexthara studied the tactical display with professional interest. Captain, your analysis suggests that the inner defenses will fight with perfect coordination. Worse than that, Admiral, they'll fight with perfect knowledge. Every tactical innovation we've developed over the past 6 months, every weapon system we've tested, every strategy we've practiced, if the collective absorbs even one Federation ship intact, it will instantly know everything about our capabilities. This had been the central challenge of the operation, fighting an enemy that grew stronger from every engagement while protecting Federation crews who had never faced such an opponent. The solution had required innovations that pushed both human and Federation technology to their absolute limits. That's why we're implementing the Prometheus Protocol, Chen explained as the display showed the modified Federation vessels. Every ship in the fleet had been equipped with human-designed neural isolation systems that would prevent consciousness absorption in the event of capture, along with self-destruct mechanisms that would trigger if the ship's systems detected Devourer infiltration. Veltar felt a chill at the implications. Captain, you're asking our crews to accept that death is preferable to capture. Ambassador, I'm asking them to accept that individual sacrifice may be necessary to prevent the permanent enslavement of 100 billion minds, Chen replied. But we've also given them the tools to fight effectively. Every Federation vessel has been equipped with reality anchors, quantum disruptors, and neural scramblers. More importantly, they've been trained in human tactical doctrine. The months of joint training had been a revelation for both sides. Federation crews had learned that human military philosophy wasn't based on simple aggression, but on a complex understanding of warfare as both art and science. Human officers, in turn, had discovered that Federation species brought perspectives and capabilities that enhanced their own strategic thinking. The operation will proceed in 3 phases, Chun continued, manipulating the tactical display to show fleet movements. Phase 1 involves the penetration of the outer defense perimeter using conventional tactics. This will appear to be a standard Federation assault, designed to make the collective underestimate our capabilities. And when they adapt to conventional weapons? Admiral Kexthara asked. Phase 2 begins when adaptation reaches critical levels. At that point, we deploy exotic weapons systems and reveal our actual combat capabilities. The collective will attempt to absorb this new information, which will trigger Phase 3. The display showed the final stage of the operation, and Veltar felt her blood freeze as she realized what the humans intended. Captain, you're planning to allow the collective to absorb human tactical data? Not absorb, Ambassador. We're planning to feed it poison. Shun gestured, and the display showed the internal structure of human command systems. What appeared to be standard tactical information was actually a sophisticated neural virus designed to exploit the collective's absorption mechanisms. Human military doctrine includes protocols for psychological warfare that go beyond anything the galaxy has previously imagined, Chen explained. The information we'll allow the collective to absorb contains embedded cognitive structures designed to create conflicts within the collective consciousness. Instead of making them stronger, absorbed human tactical knowledge will literally tear their unified intelligence apart. That's monstrous, Veltar whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant the weapon itself or the mindset that could conceive of such a thing. It's necessary, Chen replied without apology. The collective has spent 1,000,000 years perfecting its absorption process. The only way to defeat it is to turn that strength into a vulnerability. When the collective tears itself apart trying to process conflicting human tactical data, the enslaved minds will be temporarily freed from its control. That's when we implement the neural restoration protocol and extract as many consciousness patterns as possible. Admiral Kexthara leaned forward, studying the technical specifications. Captain, this plan requires split-second timing across 15,000 ships. A single coordination failure could result in the loss of billions of minds, which is why we spent 6 months training together, Chun agreed. But, Admiral, there's something else you need to know. Intelligence suggests that the Devourer expansion protocol isn't just about absorbing more star systems. We believe they're preparing for something called the Unity Transcendence. The display shifted to show analysis of energy patterns around the collective construct. The readings were unlike anything in Federation databases, waves of exotic energy that seemed to be building towards some kind of massive transformation. What kind of transcendence? Veltar asked, though she feared the answer. Our xenobiologists believe the collective is attempting to transition from physical existence to pure consciousness, Chen explained. If successful, it would become a non-corporeal intelligence with the combined knowledge and capabilities of every species it's ever absorbed. Such an entity would be effectively godlike and completely beyond physical interference. The implications were staggering. An intelligence with 1,000,000 years of absorbed knowledge and the ability to exist beyond physical constraints will be capable of dominating not just their galaxy, but potentially the entire universe. How close are they to achieving this transcendence? Admiral Kextera asked. According to our models, approximately 72 hours after they begin the expansion protocol, Chen replied, which means we have exactly 48 hours to penetrate their defenses, deploy the cognitive virus, extract the enslaved minds, and destroy the collective before they complete their transformation. The observation deck fell silent as the magnitude of their task became clear. They weren't just fighting for the freedom of enslaved minds. They were fighting to prevent the creation of a cosmic entity that could reshape reality according to its will. Captain Veltar said slowly, if humanity developed weapons capable of fighting such an enemy, what does that say about your species' own potential? Chen's expression grew distant. Ambassador, humanity spent 3 centuries preparing for this exact scenario because we recognized that we could become the same kind of threat. The difference is we chose to develop our capabilities in service of protection rather than conquest. The weapon systems we've created are designed to destroy cosmic-level threats, not to become one. And after this operation, humanity will have proven that military power can serve justice rather than domination. We'll return to our space and continue our development, but with the knowledge that if another threat like the Devourers emerges, the galaxy has a defense against it. The fleet communication system activated, broadcasting Captain Chen's voice to every ship in the massive formation. All vessels, this is Fleet Command. We've received final confirmation that the Devourer expansion protocol has begun. In 18 hours, we commenced the most important military operation in galactic history. Every mind enslaved by the collective, every civilization absorbed over the past 1,000,000 years is counting on us to succeed. Veltar watched as human and Federation crews throughout the fleet made final preparations for battle. Engineers checked weapons systems that could unmake space itself, while medical teams prepared neural restoration equipment capable of rebuilding consciousness from raw data patterns. In the cargo bays, refugee ships waited to receive the liberated minds of 100 civilizations. The operation begins at 0600 hours Galactic Standard Time, Chun continued. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and know that history will judge us by what we accomplish in the next 72 hours. Fleet Command out. As the transmission ended, Admiral Kextera turned to Veltar with an expression that mixed determination with profound uncertainty. Ambassador, 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be preparing to assault a cosmic entity with weapons that violate known physics, I'd have questioned their sanity. And now I'm questioning my own. But I've seen what the Devourers do to sentient minds, and I've seen what humans can accomplish when they decide something needs to be destroyed. If there's any force in this galaxy capable of freeing 100 billion enslaved souls, it's the fleet we've assembled here. Veltar nodded, though privately she wondered if they were about to save the galaxy or witness its destruction in the attempt. The human capacity for violence had been channeled toward justice, but violence on such a scale always carried the risk of consuming those who wielded it. Through the viewport, she could see the lights of thousands of ships as their crews made final preparations for battle. In 18 hours, they would either liberate the greatest number of enslaved minds in galactic history, or they would fail so completely that the universe itself might never recover from the consequences. The only certainty was that everything would change and there would be no turning back from whatever they were about to unleash. The first wave of the assault began with deceptive simplicity. Federation vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel in textbook formation, their energy weapons charging with the characteristic signatures that the Devourer Collective had analyzed from dozens of previous encounters. To any observer, it appeared to be exactly what the galaxy had always done when faced with an overwhelming threat, a brave but ultimately futile gesture of defiance. Captain Sarah Chun watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Retribution as the outer Devourer defense screen moved to intercept the Federation fleet. Around her, human officers monitored communication channels, weapon systems, and the exotic sensors that tracked the Collective's neural patterns. Everything depended on maintaining the illusion of conventional tactics until the critical moment. First contact in 30 seconds, reported the tactical officer. Devourer ships are maintaining standard defensive postures. No indication they're treating this as anything other than a typical Federation assault. Chen nodded, keying her communicator to address the Federation fleet commanders. All Federation vessels, commence engagement as practiced. Remember, you're selling the illusion that we're fighting with conventional tactics. Make it look desperate, but organized. The battle erupted across a front spanning several million kilometers as Federation energy weapons met Devourer bioships in what appeared to be a standard space engagement. The familiar dance of thrust and counter-thrust played out as Federation crews targeted Devourer vessels with precisely calibrated weapons designed to inflict damage without revealing their true capabilities. On the Unity's bridge, Admiral Kexteral watched his tactical displays with professional calm, though Veltar could see the tension in his posture. First exchange is proceeding according to plan, he reported. The Devourers are adapting to our weapons' signatures exactly as predicted. This was the crucial phase of the operation. The Collective needed to believe they understood Federation capabilities completely, needed to adapt their defenses to conventional energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. Every minute of apparent conventional warfare was another layer of false confidence being built into the enemy's tactical assessments. Devourer adaptive countermeasures at 60% effectiveness, the tactical officer announced. They're beginning to ignore our energy weapons entirely. Chen smiled grimly. The Collective's greatest strength, its ability to adapt to any threat, was about to become its greatest weakness. Federation fleet, begin Phase 2 on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. The space battle transformed instantly as human weapons systems came online throughout the fleet. Reality anchors created zones where the laws of physics operated according to human specifications rather than universal constants. Quantum disruptors tore holes in space-time itself, creating gravitational anomalies that the Devourer ships couldn't adapt to because they violated the fundamental nature of adaptation itself. The effect on the Collective's forces was immediate and devastating. Bioships that had been confidently absorbing Federation energy weapons suddenly found themselves unable to process the nature of the attacks hitting them. Their adaptive capabilities, honed over 1,000,000 years of conquest, encountered weapons specifically designed to make adaptation impossible. Outer defense perimeter is collapsing, reported the sensor officer. Devourer casualties at 40% and rising. Middle layer defenses are moving to reinforce, but they're maintaining standard collective coordination protocols. Chun exchanged glances with her command staff. The Collective was still treating this as a conventional threat, albeit one with unusual weapons. They hadn't yet realized that they were facing an enemy that had spent 3 centuries studying their tactics and developing countermeasures for every possible adaptive response. Begin Phase 3 infiltration, Chun ordered. Deploy cognitive virus packages on my authorization. Throughout the human fleet, specialized transmission systems activated. What appeared to be standard tactical communications between human vessels was actually a carefully crafted information package designed to be intercepted and analyzed by the Collective. The data contained detailed specifications for human weapons systems, tactical doctrines, and strategic objectives, all of which were simultaneously accurate and designed to create catastrophic conflicts within a unified consciousness. The effect wasn't immediately visible, but Chen's exotic sensors detected the first signs of neural disruption within the Collective's communication matrix. The unified intelligence that had coordinated millions of bioships for millennia was beginning to experience something it had never encountered: internal contradiction. Admiral Chun. Admiral Kexthara's voice came through the communication system. We're detecting massive energy fluctuations from the primary construct. Something is happening to the collective consciousness. Chun activated her holographic display to show the battle from a strategic perspective. The massive construct at the center of the Devourer formation was writhing with energy discharges as the cognitive virus spread through its neural matrix. The absorbed minds of 1,000 species, held in perfect slavery for millions of years, were beginning to experience moments of freedom as the collective's control fractured. All Federation medical vessels, prepare for neural extraction protocol, Chen announced. We're about to have a very narrow window to extract enslaved consciousness patterns. The space battle raged on multiple levels simultaneously. On the physical plane, Federation and human vessels fought their way through the collapsing Devourer defense networks. On the informational plane, the cognitive virus continued to spread through the collective's communication systems, creating cascading failures in their coordination protocols. And on the psychological plane, billions of enslaved minds began to remember who they had been before absorption. Chun, we're receiving communication attempts from the construct itself, reported the communications officer, his voice filled with amazement. Multiple species trying to contact us directly. Put them through, Chun ordered immediately. The bridge speakers filled with a cacophony of voices speaking in dozens of languages, all trying to communicate simultaneously. Chen's translation systems struggled to process the overlapping messages, but the desperate hope in every voice was unmistakable. This is Research Director Velnax of the Andromedan Science Collective. One voice managed to break through clearly. I've been enslaved for 800 years. Please, if you can hear this, help us before the collective regains control. Other voices joined in as the cognitive virus continued to disrupt the collective's unity. Commander Theria of the Centauri Defense Fleet, enslaved for 4 centuries. The collective is trying to reassert control. You have minutes at most. Chen activated the fleet communication system. All medical vessels begin immediate neural extraction. Target the strongest consciousness patterns first. We need to save as many as we can before the collective adapts to the virus. Specialized human medical ships, equipped with technology that had been developed specifically for this moment, moved toward the massive construct. Their neural extraction systems, capable of pulling individual consciousness patterns out of the collective matrix, began the delicate process of liberation. The construct itself seemed to realize what was happening. Massive biomechanical tentacles erupted from its surface, attempting to crush the approaching medical vessels. But Federation and human warships moved to protect them, their exotic weapons creating protective barriers that the collective's adaptive systems couldn't penetrate. Extraction proceeding, reported the medical coordinator. We've successfully liberated over 10,000 consciousness patterns in the first wave. But the collective is beginning to counter the virus effects. Chen could see it on her displays. The cognitive disruptions that had paralyzed the collective's coordination were beginning to stabilize as the alien intelligence developed new organizational structures resistant to human psychological warfare. They had perhaps another hour before the collective regained full control of its enslaved minds. All ships prepare for final phase operations, Chen announced. We're going to overload the construct's neural matrix and attempt mass liberation. This was the most dangerous part of the operation. Instead of carefully extracting individual consciousness patterns, they would flood the collective with liberation signals, attempting to free as many minds as possible in a single coordinated effort. The risk was enormous. The process could permanently damage the very minds they were trying to save, but it was their only chance to rescue the majority of the enslaved beings. Overload sequence initiating in 30 seconds. Reported the medical coordinator. All vessels report ready for mass extraction. Through her tactical displays, Chun could see the entire battle reaching its climax. Human and Federation vessels maintained defensive positions around the medical ships, while exotic weapons held the collapsing Devourer fleet at bay. The massive construct pulsed with increasingly unstable energy as its neural matrix struggled to maintain control over billions of consciousness patterns. Sequence active. Beginning mass liberation in 3, 2, 1 mark. The space around the construct exploded with light as neural extraction systems throughout the Allied fleet activated simultaneously. Streams of consciousness patterns, freed from million-year enslavement, flowed toward waiting medical vessels as the collective's control matrix collapsed under the coordinated assault. The construct itself began to tear apart as the loss of enslaved minds disrupted its fundamental structure. Without the neural patterns of absorbed civilizations to maintain its cohesion, the biomechanical components began to fail catastrophically. Extraction successful, the medical coordinator announced, his voice filled with amazement. We've liberated over 93 billion consciousness patterns. Medical ships are at maximum capacity. Chun felt a moment of profound satisfaction. They had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections, saving nearly all of the enslaved minds and destroying the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. But her tactical displays were showing new problems developing. Chun, we're detecting massive energy cascade from the construct's collapse. Admiral Kexerar reported urgently. The destruction is creating space-time distortions that could affect nearby star systems. The death of the collective was unleashing energies that had been contained for millennia. Reality itself was beginning to warp around the collapsing construct as exotic forces interacted in ways that no computer model had predicted. All ships, emergency retreat to minimum safe distance, Chen ordered. Deploy reality anchors to contain the space-time distortions. The Allied fleet pulled back from the dying construct as human reality anchor systems attempted to stabilize local space-time. The devices, designed to maintain consistent physics during exotic weapon deployment, were being pushed far beyond their intended capabilities. Through the bridge viewports, Chun watched as the construct finally collapsed completely, taking with it the accumulated knowledge and malevolence of 1,000,000 years of conquest. The explosion was visible across several light years, a brief new star that marked the end of the Devourer threat and the liberation of countless enslaved civilizations. As the immediate danger passed, Chen opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Chun. The primary objective has been achieved. The Devourer collective has been destroyed, and over 93 billion enslaved minds have been liberated. Federation medical vessels begin the restoration process for recovered consciousness patterns. The aftermath of the battle was chaos of the best possible kind. Medical ships worked frantically to provide temporary neural housing for the liberated minds, while specialists from dozens of species worked to identify and restore individual consciousness patterns to their proper forms. The process would take years, but for the first time in millennia, there was hope for the victims of Devourer conquest. Ambassador Veltar joined Chun on the observation deck of the Retribution as they watched the massive humanitarian effort unfold. Around them, ships from across the galaxy worked together with a coordination that would have been impossible before the crisis. Captain, Veltar said quietly, what humanity has accomplished here will be remembered as long as consciousness exists in this galaxy. She nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. The question now is what comes next. We've proven that military force can serve justice, but we've also demonstrated capabilities that make us potentially as dangerous as the threat we just defeated. And what does humanity intend to do with those capabilities? Exactly what we promised, Ambassador. We'll return to our space and continue our development in isolation. But we'll also maintain the technologies necessary to respond to threats like this. The galaxy now knows that peace is possible, but only because someone is prepared to fight for it when necessary. Through the viewport, they could see human vessels beginning to withdraw from the battle zone, leaving Federation ships to handle the vast humanitarian mission of restoring the liberated minds. True to their word, humanity was stepping back from galactic affairs, content to have proven that their power could serve protection rather than conquest. The Devourer threat was over, but its defeat had fundamentally changed the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. Peace could be preserved, but only through the willingness to use violence in its defense. Consciousness could be protected, but only by those prepared to fight enemies that existed beyond conventional understanding. In the end, the galaxy had learned that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization was to embrace the capacity for its destruction. The Federation would never again face an existential threat unprepared, and humanity had proven that military power could serve justice rather than replace it. The war was over, but the peace that followed would be different from anything the galaxy had known before. A peace guaranteed not by the absence of violence, but by its careful and principled application in defense of everything that made life worth living.